The Seattle Seahawks were one of the most surprising teams in the league in 2022, so naturally there's more expectations for them this season, especially after all the moves they made this offseason. Now I gotta be honest for a moment about how I viewed this team going into last year. I thought the Seahawks were going to be one of, if not the worst team in the league in 2022. I took into account how young the roster was, the drastic quarterback change at the time, going from future Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson to a career backup in Geno Smith. And I was at the mindset that Seattle was not going to build off of their 7 wins from the previous year. I'm sure some Seahawks fans remember a video I posted last offseason about how Drew Lock could end up being the quarterback of the future and how he should get a legit opportunity to prove himself to be their franchise guy and what many saw as a rebuilding year. But that quickly got thrown out of the window as Geno Smith was named the starter before camp was even over. And I remember at the time everyone saying, well, looks like the Seahawks will be picking top 5 this year. And technically they would, but not with their own pick. And that was foreshadowed in week 1 against the Denver Broncos and former quarterback who they shipped out of Seattle, Russell Wilson. When the NFL schedule was made, this matchup was circled as one of the most highly anticipated games of the year, with Russ going back to Seattle so quickly. The Broncos were actually 7-point favorites on the road, so that tells you just a little bit about the respect level between these two teams at the beginning of the season. But that week 1 victory for the Seahawks would jumpstart them out to a 7-5 record and in the midst of a playoff berth in December. However, they would go on to lose 3 straight games before showdowns with the New York Jets and their divisional rival, the Los Angeles Rams, to close the season. But it was simple. If they won both games, they would be in the playoffs and have one of the most surprising seasons in recent memory, or they'd find themselves going home. With that in mind, Pete Carroll and Geno Smith rallied the boys, and the Seahawks closed out the season with 2 wins at home, punching their ticket into the playoffs. As the 7th seed in the NFC, the Seahawks would earn the right to travel to Santa Clara and play their longtime rival, the San Francisco 49ers, for the 3rd time. I previewed all of the playoff games this past January, and I didn't really think the Seahawks had a chance in this game, just based off the talent discrepancy between the two rosters and where these two teams were. It was just different circumstances. Despite how much they overachieved, the Seahawks were still really in a rebuild year with so many young players starting, while the 49ers had been there and done that seemingly every year in the past few seasons. So I didn't really view this as a fair fight going into the game, but Seattle gave them everything they could have as they actually led 17-16 at halftime, but the wheels would fall off in the second half and their magical season would come to a close, losing 23-41. But I don't think any Seahawks fan was disappointed with their season last year. They completely proved everyone wrong, found a lot of good young players amongst their roster, and gained valuable playoff experience which will only help them in coming years. And with the massive haul they got from the Broncos in the Russell Wilson trade, the Seahawks would have 3 extra picks, including a top 5 selection and a 2nd rounder to continue to build their team. So heading into free agency and the draft, the hype surrounding the future of the Seahawks was gaining some serious momentum. The top headline regarding their offseason was what they were going to do at the quarterback position. With Geno Smith being a free agent, would they re-sign him to a long-term deal after a career year, or would they use their draft pick from the Broncos to take one of the top quarterbacks in the draft? We got our answer pretty quickly, as just 2 weeks into March, Seattle signed him to a 3-year, $75 million deal with $40 million guaranteed. With how Geno played last year, a 70% completion percentage, 4,200 yards, and 30 touchdowns, if he gets anywhere close to those numbers again, this contract is a bargain with how the quarterback market is. So with Geno coming back, the Seahawks organization had a bit more clarity on what moves to make to improve the roster, and once again, they made quite a few. In free agency, they bolstered up their defense with multiple new starters, including 2 on the defensive line. Draymond Jones comes over from Denver and had 6.5 sacks last year, and defensive tackle Jaron Reed comes over from the Packers to help out their run defense. On top of that, they would also bring back one of their best players in franchise history in Bobby Wagner to help out their linebacker unit. They'd also signed Devin Bush. It was important for them to build a bit more depth around Jordan Brooks. They also signed the former Giant Julian Love to a 2-year, $12 million deal. I don't know what role they're going to have carved out for him because they still have Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, but $12 million is a fairly good contract for a backup safety, so I do think there is a plan for him to get some good snaps, whether that's him coming in and playing as the nickel, or maybe Seattle has a way that they're going to cycle through all of their safeties. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they signed 2 new starters on their offensive line, Bill Haynes at right guard to replace Gabe Jackson, and Evan Brown to be their new starting center from the Lions. So Seattle acquired quite a few new starters early in the process, and because of that, they went into the draft with not a ton of needs, and it allowed them to take their best player on the board, and we saw that in full force with their first pick. Heading into the first round, the Seahawks were seen as a huge wild card. There wasn't a consensus for them with the 5th overall pick. I honestly thought it was going to be Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson. That was my prediction for them, just a high potential D lineman to help out that unit, but instead they took a flyer on round cornerback Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois, to pair with their 5th round stud from last year in Tariq Woolen. This was the first wow pick of the draft, but Witherspoon is a really good player. He's a tough man-to-man press corner who can cause turnovers, and he's going to have an immediate impact on this defense this season. But that wasn't their only pick in the first round. Just 15 picks later, Seattle was on the board again, and they made yet another surprising pick, this time being Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver out of Ohio State, who many people consider the best wide receiver in this class. Now, Seattle already had 2 really good wide receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, which is what made the selection surprising, but with Tyler Lockett on the wrong side of 30 and the need to fill their number 3 wide receiver position, Seattle thought the value of getting Jaxon in this spot was too good to pass up. And I made a video during the draft process about every single top wide receiver in this past year's draft, and my evaluation on Jaxon is he's got a super high floor. He's immediately going to come in and be a really nice player, but I don't know if his ceiling is as high as some of his counterparts in this class, such as Quentin Johnston or Zay Flowers, mainly because of his lack of physical attributes. He's not the tallest guy, he's not the fastest guy, he's just an all-around solid player, and I think realistically he's going to end up being someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown. That was a pretty popular comp for him since St. Brown isn't super gifted as well, but wins off of just being a really good football player. And if Jaxon turns out to be as good as St. Brown or even better, that's a home run hit. St. Brown has already established himself as a top 15 wide receiver, and he's seen as the best slot guy in the league. But so far in Seahawks training camp, Jaxon is living up to the hype. He's been absolutely killing it day in and day out, and he's honestly been one of the most talked about players I've seen across social media. It seems like every day I see a new highlight of him. The amount of clips and crazy catches I've seen in such a short time has actually been kind of wild. The most popular one was a one-handed touchdown catch between 2 defenders. I've also seen a screen pass that showed off his nice burst and his yak ability. On top of that, his route running looked crisp, as did his short-range quickness. The Seahawks also have him practicing returning punts, so that might be another element they decide to use him in this year. But nonetheless, so far in camp, he has been really impressive, and I'm sure as we get deeper into camp and into the preseason, he's only going to continue to stack these ridiculous plays. Geno Smith was asked about what he's seen so far from Jaxon, and he said he can do it all. Man, he's a great player. Jackson's one of those guys, if you put him out there on one-on-one, he's going to win his battles. We've been seeing that so far. DK Metcalf was even asked about him, and he gave a super positive review as well. He simply said he's going to be special. I knew you were going to ask about him. He's going to be special. So now you add in Jaxon to an already really good wide receiver core, and the weaponry for the Seahawks has jumped up to the top of the league. They drafted Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State in the 2nd round of last year's draft, and he showed a lot of promise as a rookie, but this year they decided to double dip with another running back in the 2nd round this year in Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. So you combine the 3 wide receivers they're going to throw out wide with a 2-headed monster in the backfield, and man, the Seattle offense has a chance to be really scary. Overall, I really like what the Seahawks organization did this offseason, and I think they're primed to take another step as a team next season. The talent level on this team is drastically different than what we've seen from them in the past couple of years, and John Snyder and Pete Carroll deserve a lot of credit for that. But I'm going to be very excited to see how much this team grows next year and if they can win their first playoff game since 2019. Let me know what you think about Jaxon Smith-Njigba and how many yards you think he's going to have as a rookie, and also let me know how many games you think the Seattle Seahawks will win in 2023. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.